nearly a half century ago, but using chance for several years, then I stopped using it. So that means I used chance process in my very early career. That time, I was trying to find my own style of composition. And as you know, if you intuitively compose, your composition will turn out to be something like you have heard before. Well, it sounds like somebody else's music which you listen to. And that kind of situation I wanted to get out as a young composer, of course. And I thought to try to find my own way, I have to do something unusual to me. And I decided to use chance as an experiment. And what I did actually is that I prepared a scale consisting of 14 or 15 tones. I don't remember exactly how many tones I used, but anyway, 14 or 15, something like that. And with my favorite intervals, second and third, and just accumulated, and I made a scale or gamut. And out of that gamut, I chose pitches randomly using chance operations or dice. And as a result, you have some randomly chosen pitches in the line of the pitches in front of you. And I tried to observe or listen to the lines of tones very carefully. And I found that it's a very interesting phenomenon, at least to me, it seems very interesting. That is, since also the pitches are chosen at random, the distribution of the specific pitches within that line is somehow biased. The random choice always somehow biased when you take a certain segment of it. But if you listen to the first three notes, for instance, you may feel some tonal center, say C is center in among these three notes. But then if you take the second note to say 6 notes, these groups or segment seems to have a different tonal center, or it doesn't have any tonal center at all. So it depends on how you segmentate the line randomly chosen of pitches. The tonal center emerges and disappears, and very, very unstable status of that kind of tonalities comes out. And I found it very interesting. And so I decided to use that kind of ambiguity in my composition. That was how I used the chance. But then keep doing that kind of process for 2 or 3 years, I began to feel that my ear has been somehow trained by that kind of process, so that I don't have to use that particular chance process anymore. Even if I compose intuitively, I can go into that kind of world I can find out of that chance process. So that's how I stopped doing that. And what I was interested is that not just to find the sound world I am interested in, but also I found that I found from that kind of process that the structure of music is not given by the composer, but given by the listener, which means that if you look at the nature as a landscape, if you appreciate nature as a landscape, that means you framed by yourself the nature to make it a landscape. So the frame is imposed by you on the nature. And also not just the framing, but also you impose some kind of structure in that framed landscape, so that you can really appreciate that landscape. So that means we always think the composer gives the piece structure and the listener, they simply perceive it. But my idea is that composer is also a listener who simply perceives the sound or simply found the structure among the sound listed up in front of you. So that kind of chance process enlightened me how to compose from the listener's point of view. That was very important to me. That John had a great influence on me. And particularly, I regard my composition as a kind of a natural object. Well, it is not natural. It is not a natural object simply because I make it. But as an attitude, I always take that I am making something like a natural object, and John's music is in that way. And in his case, his music is more like a natural object, aren't they? And I think that is the most important aspect that John and I shared each other. But on the other hand, John always tried not to control any sound, while I'm interested in making sound, maybe not controlling it, but I'm interested in discovering sound which I like, rather than leave any sound coming in. That's the difference, at least from my point of view. Naturally, I was interested in the many different kinds of music, and still now, of course. But I tried to imitate the many different styles fashionable at that time. Well, starting from dodecaphony, or cluster music, or serial music, or almost everything. And when I listen to John's music or Feldman's or those New York experimentalism composers, I found that well, let me put in this way. I try to imitate many different the styles of then fashionable, but those methodology of making music is naturally how to make music. But what I felt from a Cage or Feldman, they are telling us how to listen to music rather than how to make music. And since I love listening to music, and still now, so I am more interested in listening to than making music. Well, it is a big contradiction that although I'm saying this, I'm still making it, Well, in the same case, the John has a big contradiction. He said after he made the 4 minutes and 30 seconds, theoretically, he has no need to compose anymore. But he kept composing till the end of his life, And that shows he is a real composer as a species, the composer kind of human being. And in that sense, I'm too. I'm a composer kind of human being who are very involved in listening to music rather than making up or cooking up something.
If you were to describe your modern process of writing music, how would you describe it now?
Modern process, you mean what I'm doing now, right?
Yeah, so your early stage, you worked with chants and you created these small sort of biased scales, you refer to them as. Um, how, if you were to write a piece today, how would your approach be different?
Well, I'm simply improvising. I mean, my composition, every single composition of mine is an improvisation on paper. But it is different from the improvisation directly on the instrument. Because when you work on the paper, it takes up a lot of time. Just to improvise 2 or 3 notes, you may take 2 days or 3 days, which is an advantage to me. In that way, I feel. If you go improvisation on the instrument directly, somehow your hands automatically leads you to the music which your hands used to be, your hands used to. And it is no, it is not kind of improvisation I would like to do, but I prefer improvisation on the paper. And since I felt that my ear has been trained a long time before by that kind of the result of the chance operation, I now feel I'm very free to improvise in that kind of world. That's how I compose. And I never planned any structure or any form beforehand. So the structure somehow comes out. I mean, or in other words, I will somehow fascinated to discover the structure among the notes I improvised. That's how I enjoy composing.
I one comparison that's often made, and it really one of the reasons I always want to ask you about chants because I find it so fascinating is the contrast between you and a composer like Xenakis particularly, but also Cage to a certain degree. They used chants or over a much kind of larger scale. With Cage's music of changes, Xenakis used chants, and he found it produced a very uniform, very homogeneous effect. You had the kind of opposite way of using chants, and that's what I found so fascinating about your early style, is that you used it to produce something incredibly specific. That's less a question and more an observation. One of the things I was curious about is, had you actually encountered any chance music before you used chance yourself? Were you aware of John Cage's music or Xenakis's music?
Yeah, I made quite a few pieces using a graphic notation, which is in a way similar to John's or their generation of American experimentalism was also the second generation of it, like Bob Ashley, David Berman, or those composers. I imitate what they were doing that time, and at the same time, I also imitated what Xenakis was doing. Of course, I didn't understand his mathematical methodology correctly, but somehow, through my ear, somehow I tried to imitate what he was doing. But what I found is that Xenakis was using chance simply to make sound. And he connects the sound not by chance, intentionally to make the drama of sound. So, in other words, he's making his sound material by using chance, simply to that degree. And he never used to deconstruct whole piece, overall structure by chance, while John make everything by chance. And also the one thing I may have to emphasize is that I prefer the each tiny sound is independent entity by itself. So in the next case, each sound particle is not its own entity. It's simply an element to build up the huge cluster, isn't it? But if you're listening to John's music, and you can somehow perceive that each sound is independent, and maybe each sound comes from a different direction, different sources. You never know how it brought out, and that kind of independency of each particular sound is very much similar what I look at the world. I mean, I don't want to emphasize my Japanese influence on my music, but one of my favorite book that I read in high school age was Buddhist text, and of course, Buddhistic philosophy itself is a very complicated, but still one of the core idea in that is that the world consists of the accumulation or collection of this small particle, each of which has its own world. And I feel very sympathetic to that kind of world view. And somehow the John's music connected me to that kind of world view, to music, or even to composition.